Jace Yarbrough, thank you so much. We appreciate it. So as you know, you're in the GOP primary runoff May 28th for the open Senate District C30, 30th District. Why do you want to be a state senator?
I've always felt a vocational call to politics as an adult, so part of it is a sense that when the Lord gives you talents and experiences and formation that can be used to do good work, you should go and do that work. We got into this race in particular because we saw a need for a candidate who had the competence and conviction to represent Senate District 30, which is a Trump plus 23 district. It's a very red district. And our conviction, along with the conviction of a number of other people in the Senate District, was that if red representation was going to exist in the Texas Senate, it had to come from places like Senate District 30. We didn't see that kind of option in the race, and so we got in on the last day to file in order to provide that to the people of Senate District 30.
And so why should Republicans and others vote for you in this runoff over your opponent?
My convictions back up what I say I believe, and my recent past and extended past proves that when I present myself as a grassroots conservative candidate who shares the convictions of the people who live in my district, I mean it. Some of your audience may know I put 12 years toward a military pension on the line to stand up against the vaccine. And the majority of voters, Republican voters certainly in Senate District 30, are very much opposed to vaccine mandates and very much in favor of medical freedom. That's one issue on which I stood very firm, and I have the scars to prove it. I think those are the kinds of things from my past that distinguish me from my opponent.
You're talking about the COVID vaccine mandates.
That's correct.
And so, as you know, your opponent has a lot of endorsements from, former President Donald Trump, Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor, Senator Cornyn. How do you go up against somebody who's got all those endorsements?
Well, the short answer is you don't as an individual. If this is something that I was trying to kind of fabricate on my own, I would certainly lose against powerful people like that. Let me say initially that I'm not running against any of those people. I'm running against my opponent in this race. It's very important that you're able to work with the most powerful people down in Austin to get good things done for the state of Texas and for your Senate district, and I'm absolutely committed to doing that. You would be hard-pressed to find daylight between my conservative policy convictions and the conservative convictions of a number of the very powerful politicians that you just mentioned. But at the end of the day, the thing that the voters in Senate District 30 want to know is, will you stand up for me when the powers that be down in Austin want you to do something that goes against what's good for our communities? And the fact that I'm running in this race demonstrates to them that I am somebody who is going to do that in the final instance. I'm very proud of the endorsements that we have received in this race. So it's true that my opponent has a number of endorsements from very well-known politicians in the state. But we've been endorsed by virtually every grassroots organization in our Senate district and across the state. Everyone from Grassroots America, We the People, and Texas Right to Life to the Grayson County Conservatives and the Parker County Conservatives. So good people are lining up behind us, and I think even with all those endorsements, the distance between my opponent and I in a four-way primary was something like 2,000 votes, which amounted to just over 2%. We fought him to a virtual tie, even though he had a lot of very powerful people behind him. The reason for that is we are the ones who share the conservative convictions of our Senate district, and the voters in the Senate district can see that.
I was going to ask you, what do your endorsements say about your campaign?
At the end of the day, I think they say that those people that look hard at the two candidates, that have vetting committees and questionnaires, those who are on the ground and have had experience with each of us. My opponent, as you may know, was the chairman of the Denton County GOP, so there are many people that are familiar with him, and your audience may or may not be familiar with a letter that was published by over 70 local leaders, precinct chairs, who have direct experience with him, calling him out for a number of ways in which he destroyed our county party. What you'll notice about my opponent's endorsements is that while many of them come from conservative people, they come from folks who are outside the Senate district. My endorsement list is full of people who are in the Senate district and who are going to be subject to the political decisions that are made by whoever wins this office. I think that, again, they underscore the fact that what the voters in our district want is someone who's going to stand up for them in the final instance and always prioritize their best interests first.
Your opponent has been accused of living outside the district, and not being in the district for a year beforehand, as the rule is, the state requires. Where are you on this? Do you think he is eligible?
No, my opponent's not eligible. The constitutional requirement in the state is that you live in the district for a year before the election for which you're running. So for us, that's November the 5th, 2023. You need to be a resident of Senate District 30 as of that date. The incumbent, Senator Springer, did not announce that he was stepping down until November the 7th, 2023, which is 2 days after that deadline. That, in my mind, is the event that triggered my opponent's decision to try and fabricate residency in this district. Now, why don't I believe that he lives there or did live there as of November the 5th? He has a homestead on a lakefront property, $1 million lakefront property in Senate District 12, and he has resided there and voted there since 2017, to include the election that concluded on November the 7th, 2023. So he voted on October the 29th from his Senate District 12 address. He claims on his filing paperwork that he lives in the third floor of a commercial office complex in Senate District 30 that his trucking company rents. Under Denton City Ordinance, living in that commercial office complex would result in a $2,000 per day fine and a new Class C misdemeanor for every day that a person resided there. There are a number of other issues and stark evidence that proves that he does not live there, but that is what he is saying and claiming. The only court he asked the district court, a number of, well, actually all three of the candidates who challenged him in the primary filed suit against him. One of those suits was in the Denton County District Court. He asked that district court to dismiss his suit. That court said, no, there's enough here to go to trial, so we're going to do that. My opponent and his attorneys are delaying that trial. They're doing everything they can to avoid it, but that's where we sit, at least as to litigation.
He has said that the voters should decide this ultimately, not the courts.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to that?
I think that our constitutional requirements are there for a reason. If our Constitution says that in order to be eligible to even run, you have to live in a district for a year, I think we should enforce that requirement. That being said, we are absolutely committed to winning this race at the ballot box. Our performance in the primary is evidence of the quality of the work that we're going to put in to do that. And so many dynamics about this runoff lean in favor of us. If we put in the work and we raise the resources, we are going to beat my opponent at the ballot box.
What are your top three priorities if you're elected?
The border, education, and property taxes. What's going on at our southern border is both an existential and a constitutional crisis. Existential, obviously, because we can only handle so much as a culture and a society of people who are not, who don't share our convictions and our values, coming here and existing and living in our communities, especially when thousands or even hundreds of thousands of those are criminals and even known criminals. What's going on in our schools is unprecedented and frankly insane in a number of ways. I think Texas parents are realizing that. And then property taxes. We want a property tax system that encourages people to put down roots and build lasting legacies. That's what's going to make our communities and our state strong. And right now we have a number of folks, especially in Senate District 30, who are at risk of losing homes and land that have been in their family for generations because they can't afford property tax bills, which are doubling and trebling in the course of just a couple of years.
I want to go back on the border. SB 4, controversial bill, is now in the federal courts.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going to happen, how they're going to decide whether to uphold it and
Mm-hmm.
allow it to go through or to declare it unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm.
If that happens, if it is declared unconstitutional, then what? What do you think Texas should do?
Regardless of what happens with SB 4, Texas needs its own border protection unit. We are using temporary resources down at the border to try and fix what is a permanent problem. And by permanent, I don't mean that it won't ebb and flow. So the best thing that we could do to fix the issue at the border in the immediate term is to elect Donald Trump in November. But we're not always going to win the White House as Republicans. The next Democratic administration will remanufacture the crisis that's going on down there. We need a border protection unit that is completely controlled and funded by the state. Right now, we're using DPS troopers, highway patrolmen, under Operation Lone Star, and National Guardsmen. The Biden administration has already threatened to federalize the National Guard piece of that, in which case they would no longer be under our control. And the DPS troopers who go down there, like the guardsmen, they don't live at the border. This is a temporary assignment for them. My brother was a DPS trooper when Operation Lone Star kicked up, and he was down at the border 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. One of the weeks off back at home station, he was working nights. When you put all that together, he was seeing his 4 children, whom he and his wife had just adopted out of the Texas foster care system, roughly 2 to 3 days a month, which was unsustainable for them. And he asked the question, how much longer am I going to have to do this? And the answer was probably till we get a new president. So he left. And I'm sure his story is not uncommon. I haven't seen numbers on this, but I would not be surprised if the number of divorces and substance abuse among DPS troopers has increased since we started Operation Lone Star. The point is that we need a unit down there that is assigned to the border and there permanently, and that's their primary task, because this is not a temporary problem.
Do you think they should be law enforcement officers?
That would be the most effective, and it would be easiest to train them and to ensure that the interactions they have with those who are coming across illegally are appropriate. Right? I think no option should be off the table. We should do everything we can to solidify our southern border and to seal it. But yes, that would be my preference.
You said before that parts of the education system are insane.
Yes, they are insane.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that we are living in a time in which basic issues of biology and fact are denied by school administrators or teachers who are supposed to be forming our children in, I would say, good, right, and true things. The transgenderism and gender ideology craze that's sweeping our schools and our youth, not just in Texas but across the country, is an example of denying a basic fact of life. And when you do that, you see a lot of terrible consequences. So I'm a litigator now. I was active duty and then got out, went to law school. What I do now is I defend conservative causes and clients in the courts. I was defending a Christian psychologist out of the state of Washington. That state had passed a fairly draconian law that was targeted at Christian counselors. It was related to this issue of gender dysphoria. And as a result of that representation, I had to do a deep dive into what we call transgender medicine. And I will tell you, the way I phrase this is the pagans have nothing on us, given what we do to children in the name of medicine. The only way to describe these surgeries and the effect of a lot of these drugs on kids is demonic. And how is that related to schools and education? Well, just this past fall, Denton ISD, one of the largest school districts in Senate District 30, voted to put a pediatric clinic in a local high school. If having medical professionals in proximity to minors without their parents present doesn't concern you, then you haven't been paying attention as to how this issue has progressed, especially in other states. And so that's one example. The fact that we have pornography in public school libraries is another. I mean, many people ask the question when they see some of these very graphic books that are pushing the sexualization of our kids. They say, well, where were the adults in the room whenever these books were allowed in? Right? And there are some adults, and the Denton ISD school board is unfortunately full of them, which look at these books and say, no, this is something that should be allowed. This is something that we affirmatively want to put in front of our children. I describe that as insane.
Following up on education, do you think teachers should get a raise?
The short answer is yes, I do, but I don't think more money to our education system is the answer. It's no secret that even though education funding has increased in Texas, teacher pay and benefits have not increased proportionally with that increase. I think the most important piece of any child's education is the teacher that is there instructing and even learning with the child. So we should do everything we can to encourage the best among us to go into the profession of teaching, especially those that feel called to do it. I think that the overrepresentation, for example, of women in teaching is a result of us treating it as if it is a second income earner profession. And it was for a time for other reasons, but I think having good quality male teachers is also really important, and so I'm in favor of increasing pay for teachers, but noting that more money to the Texas public education system overall is certainly not a goal that I have.
And can you do both? I mean, can you not increase education funding and have school districts pay more for teachers?
Well, I think there's a question of why it is that, where is this extra funding going? Some of it's going to administrative overhead, some of it's going to pornographic books in public libraries. And so I can already see at least a couple of places in which I'd be very interested in asking some hard questions and potentially certainly exposing some of the allocations that are happening with that. The short answer is I don't have anything in mind in terms of what I'm going to cut now, but I can see many things in the Texas public school system which Texas parents would be absolutely in favor of cutting and removing. So in general, the thing that I want more than anything else in our public schools is good quality teachers, right? Because setting up a perfect system in which guarantees certain outcomes is perhaps not possible. But if you have good teachers on the ground, like I had when I went through the public school system, right? I had a couple of teachers that I still maintain relationships with. Even when you have those teachers in an imperfect system, they're the ones who are going to be able to do the most to help these kids. And so I'm committed to that. I'm committed to attracting them.
Property taxes, should they gradually be eliminated in the state?
I'm in favor of that, absolutely. And for reasons that I mentioned before, which is we want folks to come to Texas to put down roots, to build legacies, and the home is very much at the center of that, and the future of the home is at the center of that. We want people to be able to trust that the investments they're making now are going to impact the communities around them, and that their children and their grandchildren are going to benefit from those. If folks are at risk of losing their homes, right, and being forced out of the places that they've been grown up in and formed in, then that undermines their willingness and eagerness to make the place they live better.
And how do you fund the government?
Well,
and schools?
Yeah, the majority of our revenue currently comes from a consumption tax, and so expanding a base expanding the base of that is one example that folks have floated. There are a number of other options on the table, committing a certain percentage of any budget surplus to buying down M&O, which is the biggest piece of school property taxes, and a number of others. I'm certainly not a property tax expert, but I absolutely am in favor of the Republican Party's plank to reduce and eliminate property taxes for the reasons that I mentioned. And I do think that this is an area that does draw a contrast between me and my opponent. You may have seen he's on record as referring to this idea as ridiculous, I think was the word that he used.
My last question is about a project that got a permit in Dorchester up in Grayson County.
Yes.
A cement kiln.
Yes.
And I know that people up there are very upset about this. Where are you on this?
I absolutely oppose it. I attended the TCEQ hearing back in March. I testified publicly along with hundreds of other citizens of Grayson County against the kiln because of the effects they would have on the local community. I can tell you that they packed that. It was standing room only in a room of 500 to 600 people. Very much opposed to this kiln coming in this spot. Would have negative effects on, among other things, the silicon wafer plant that was brought it. My predecessor had a lot to do with bringing that project to Grayson County, which folks are now referring to as Silicon Prairie because of how significant the investment is going to be there, and how significant this development is, not just for us in Texas, but also the country because of the uniqueness of the technology that's going to be manufactured there. So absolutely against it. I told the folks who were there sitting on the panel that when I was elected the senator for Senate District 30, I would oppose the kiln being installed in this location with all the powers of our office.
Anything else you'd like to say?
I'm really grateful to the people of Senate District 30, all the friends that we made along the campaign trail. It's a thrill to be someone who is a part of the movement that is going to lead to our victory on May the 28th. And if folks want someone they can trust, who shares their conservative convictions and who's already proven that he won't bend when the powers that be down in Austin try and force him to do something that's against their interests, then I'd appreciate their vote on May 28th.
Jace Yarbrough, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate you for having me.